All right, let's jump right in. Welcome back to this explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the epic text of the book of Exodus. We're going to trace this absolutely fascinating transition from a dramatic, edge-of-your-seat escape from slavery, all the way to the incredibly detailed legislative blueprint of a brand new society.
To really kick things off, we have to ask the core question that drives this entire narrative. Think about it. How do you take an enormous group of people who have literally only known bondage for generations and somehow build a functioning, highly structured nation entirely from scratch? Well, we're going to look at the exact blueprint of how they pulled it off.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 1. Bondage and the calling. 2. The 10 plagues and Passover. 3. Crossing the Red Sea. 4. Trials in the wilderness. 5. Sinai and the law. And finally 6. Building the tabernacle. Let's get to it.
Starting off with Section 1, Bondage and the Calling.
It is seriously fascinating to see how a small family that originally came to Egypt with Jacob grew over a 400-year period into a massive population. Just to put that into perspective, that's a span of time older than the entire history of the United States. The text actually notes that they multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, but this triggers a huge panic in a new Egyptian king, one who didn't know their ancestor Joseph. Fearing a massive uprising, Pharaoh enforces bitter bondage. He makes them build treasure cities like Pithom and Ramses with mortar and brick. And the oppression doesn't stop at hard labor. It escalates to a devastating, horrific decree, ordering the midwives to kill all Hebrew male infants. But out of this extreme desperation, one mother hides her baby in an ark of bulrushes by the river. Miraculously, he's discovered and adopted by Pharaoh's own daughter. And that child, of course, is Moses.
Now, as Moses grows up, he ultimately has to flee Egypt after defending a Hebrew and killing an Egyptian taskmaster. So he ends up as a simple shepherd in Midian. And this brilliantly illustrates our turning point. Out in the desert, Moses encounters a bush that is burning, but, and here's the catch, it isn't consumed. From this fire, he receives a monumental divine commission to return to Egypt and free his people. Now, Moses is heavily doubting his own public speaking abilities. He essentially asks, "Who do I even say sent me?" And he's given this definitive, incredibly powerful name, I am that I am. It establishes absolute authority for the crazy mission ahead.
Moving right along to Section 2, 10 Plagues and Passover.
So, Moses returns to Egypt, demands freedom, but Pharaoh stubbornly refuses. What follows is not just random destruction, guys. It's a rapid, systematic escalation. We go from the Nile River literally turning to blood to swarms of frogs, lice, and flies. Then, it targets their economy with the death of livestock and ruinous hail that just decimates their crops, followed by locusts that eat whatever the hail happened to leave behind. Then comes a darkness so thick the text says it can be felt. This whole sequence is deliberately designed to systematically dismantle Egypt's power. It proves that their gods and their ruler are entirely powerless to stop the liberation of the Israelites.
But here's what's super interesting. The text deliberately pauses the epic, terrifying action of the final plague, the death of the firstborn, to lay out some highly specific procedural instructions. Right in the middle of a national crisis, they are handed a ritual, the Passover. They're told to select a perfect lamb, paint its blood on their doorposts so the plague will pass over them, and eat the meal in haste, complete with unleavened bread and your shoes on your feet. This isn't just about surviving for one night. It's a brilliant, calculated move to establish a lasting cultural identity and an ordinance to be kept forever. It binds the community together right at the exact moment of their liberation.
Which brings us to Section 3, Crossing the Red Sea. Pharaoh inevitably changes his mind and pursues the fleeing Israelites with 600 chosen chariots. The people are trapped between the wilderness and the sea, and they are absolutely terrified. But Moses stretches out his hand, and a strong east wind divides the sea. The ultimate victory of their liberation is captured perfectly right here in the text. The waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. This allows them to pass right through on dry land. And when the Egyptians try to pursue them into the seabed, their chariot wheels fall off, the waters return, and Pharaoh's army is completely overthrown. The physical chains of Egypt are officially broken.
But the physical part is just the beginning. Let's look at Section 4, Trials in the Wilderness.
Forming a new identity is an immense struggle. You know the old saying, you can take the people out of Egypt, but it's much, much harder to take Egypt out of the people. Mentally, the Israelites are completely tethered to their past. The text tells us they are constantly murmuring, looking back at the flesh pots of Egypt, where they at least had bread to the full, and bitterly complaining that they've been led out into the desert to starve. Yet, their physical reality is completely different.
They're receiving constant, miraculous provisions. When the waters at Mara are bitter, a tree sweetens them. Every single morning they are given a small, browned bread called manna, which tastes like honey wafers. When they thirst again, water bursts from a solid rock in Horeb. So they are physically free, but unlearning the mentality of a slave? That takes much longer.
And keep in mind the staggering scale of this operation. Moses isn't managing some small village. The text notes he is suddenly leading about 600,000 men on foot, and that's not even counting children, families, and massive flocks. This is a logistical nightmare. It gets so overwhelming that when his father-in-law, Jethro, comes to visit, he watches Moses trying to judge every single dispute from morning till evening. Jethro tells him straight up, "The thing that thou doest is not good, thou wilt surely wear away." So Jethro advises Moses to delegate. He suggests creating a hierarchy of rulers over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. He essentially becomes the world's first middle management consultant. It's the very first step toward a structured civic administration.
That need for administration naturally leads to Section 5, Sinai and the Law.
3 months after leaving Egypt, they camp at Sinai amidst thunder, lightning, and a literally smoking mountain. The famous 10 Commandments, delivered here, neatly categorized into 2 foundational pillars. On one hand, you have laws establishing absolute respect for divine authority, having no other gods, banning graven images, respecting the divine name, and keeping the Sabbath day. But equally important are the laws establishing ethical peace with your fellow citizens. Because, let's face it, you cannot have a functioning society without honoring parents and outlawing murder, theft, adultery, perjury, and even the internal desire to take what belongs to your neighbor. It is a brilliant, highly concise social contract. Now, the 10 Commandments are really just the summary. They are immediately followed by the incredibly dense Covenant Code, which reveals a highly sophisticated civic blueprint. Under property and liability, it dictates exact restitution if, say, your ox gores someone, or if you leave a pit open and an animal falls in. For personal injury, it establishes the famous eye for eye proportionality. And the whole point of that was to limit endless blood feuds. Crucially, looking at the social justice element, there are strict mandates not to vex a stranger. Why? Because as the text reminds them, ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. It fiercely protects the most vulnerable, widows and orphans. They are systematically replacing the tyranny of Pharaoh with the rule of law.
All right, finally we hit Section 6, building the tabernacle. So they build a mobile sanctuary, the tabernacle, which brilliantly illustrates a massive shift in their culture. It required materials like precious metals, fine twined linen in blue, purple, and scarlet, shittim wood, and rare spices. But unlike those treasure cities they built for Pharaoh under the whip, these materials were gathered through voluntary community investment. The text specifically says to take the offering from every man that giveth it willingly with his heart. And they brought so much, in fact, that Moses eventually had to tell them to stop bringing materials. There was no way to use it all. They are collectively, willingly buying into their new identity.
And at the very heart of this incredible architectural marvel was the Ark of the Covenant. It was a precise, sacred chest overlaid with pure gold, featuring a mercy seat with facing cherubims whose wings stretched out on high. But its most important function wasn't just to look spectacular. It was designed specifically to hold the physical stone tablets, the literal testimony of the law. The Ark represents the ultimate merging of their newfound spiritual identity and their strict new legal code. The law was, quite literally, the center of their camp. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. We've watched a fractured, traumatized group of slaves transform into a highly structured nation with complex liability laws, delegated judicial systems, and fierce protections for the vulnerable. So thousands of years later, how much of our modern understanding of human rights, civic duty, and community building is still echoing the foundation laid down in this incredible wilderness journey? It is truly something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.